We talk about sex as if it's just physical. Hormones, chemistry, attraction. But if sex were only about the body, why does it feel so confusing? Why are we drawn to people who destabilize us? Why do we crave those who barely see us? And why do the ones who treat us perfectly sometimes make us feel nothing at all? Carl Jung understood something most people avoid. Sex is never just sex. It is the language of the unconscious. When you feel an uncontrollable sexual pull towards someone, it isn't your body choosing. It's your shadow, the part of you you've suppressed, avoided, or never healed. Sex doesn't expose the body. It exposes the truth you've been running from. And until you understand that, you'll keep mistaking intensity for destiny. Sex is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. We talk about it as if it's mechanical, physical, biological. Hormones, chemistry, timing, attraction. We reduce it to bodies touching bodies, nerves firing, instincts playing out. But that explanation has always felt incomplete. Because if sex were only physical, it would be predictable. It would follow logic. It would obey values, preferences, and intentions. And yet, it doesn't. You can desire someone who contradicts everything you believe in. You can crave someone who destabilizes your life. You can feel nothing for someone who treats you perfectly. You can feel consumed by someone who barely sees you. That contradiction alone exposes the lie. Carl Jung understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Sex is never just about sex. It is about the unconscious. It is about the shadow. The shadow is the part of you that lives outside your self-image. The part you repress, deny, hide, or never learned how to express. It holds your unmet needs, your forbidden emotions, your unclaimed power, your unresolved pain. And sex is one of the shadow's favorite languages. Sex is not led by the body. The body is only the instrument. The signal comes from much deeper. When you feel a strong sexual pull toward someone, it is not because of their appearance alone. The body reacts, yes, but it reacts after something internal has already been activated. Before desire becomes physical, it is psychological. Before craving becomes sensation, it is memory. Sexual attraction is the unconscious recognizing something familiar. Not familiar in a logical sense, familiar in an emotional one. That familiarity can come from childhood wounds, unmet needs, emotional patterns you grew up inside of, or traits you were never allowed to develop. The unconscious does not operate on morality or reason. It operates on resonance, and resonance does not care whether something is good for you. It only cares whether something matches the blueprint it carries. Think about the most intense sexual attraction you've ever experienced. Not casual interest, not polite attraction, but that consuming, irrational pull. It likely didn't make sense. It probably disrupted your stability. It may have contradicted your standards. It almost certainly bypassed your logic. That's because logic was never involved. Your shadow was choosing. Jung said that the shadow chooses what the ego refuses to see. The ego wants safety, consistency, control, and identity. The shadow wants truth, especially the truth you avoid. So when someone ignites your sexual energy, they are not activating your body. they are activating something dormant inside you, something unfinished, something unexpressed. Maybe they awaken your hunger for intensity. Maybe they reflect your desire for chaos. Maybe they mirror your need for tenderness. Maybe they symbolize freedom you've denied yourself. Deep connection becomes a doorway the unconscious uses to gently bring you back to yourself. That's why it feels so powerful. Why it feels a little exposing. Why control slowly begins to fade. In those moments, the masks we wear every day start to fall away. What remains is the real you, beneath rules, morals, and the image you show the world. You can lie with words. You can hide things in relationships. You can even lie to yourself. But in true intimacy, your feelings always tell the truth. Because the unconscious does not lie, it expresses truth through instinct. This is why sexual patterns repeat. People often say their attraction is random, but there is no randomness in psychology. If you are repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable people, it is not coincidence. It is repetition. It is your unconscious returning to an emotional environment it learned early in life. If you crave intense validation at the beginning of relationships, it often points to a time when your emotional needs were inconsistently met. If chaos feels exciting, your nervous system may have learned that unpredictability equals love. If safety feels boring, it may be because safety was never associated with emotional aliveness for you. Your attraction is not really about the person. It's about the emotional pattern they represent. That's why two people can look almost the same, yet only one creates that deep pull. The difference isn't physical, it's symbolic. One of them fits an emotional template stored deep in your unconscious. The other doesn't. This pull is the shadow trying to finish an unfinished story. And this is why desire can feel addictive. People think they're attached to a person, or to excitement, or to a feeling. But what they're really attached to is the version of themselves that comes alive in that connection. In those moments, parts of you wake up, parts that feel alive, seen, powerful, and emotionally real. And when that feeling fades, the craving grows stronger, not because the person is gone, but because the self retreats back into dormancy. The more disconnected you are from your emotional truth, the stronger that pull becomes. Sex becomes a substitute for self-connection, a shortcut to feeling whole. People say they have a type, but your type is not physical. Your type is psychological. Your type shares emotional qualities, not appearances. They reflect your wounds, your needs, your shame, your longing. They mirror your shadow. This is why the strongest sexual connections often feel dangerous, not because the other person is inherently dangerous, but because they awaken emotions you've suppressed for years. Sex with someone who mirrors your shadow feels like emotional exposure. It feels like stepping into a locked room inside yourself. It feels like rediscovering a version of you that was buried for survival. And that is terrifying, because the shadow does not care about comfort. It cares about integration. Jung believed the unconscious pushes you toward what you need to face, not what you want to face. So when sexual attraction pulls you toward someone confusing, disruptive, or emotionally intense, it is not punishment. It is an invitation to confront the parts of yourself you've avoided. Until you accept that invitation, sex becomes the battlefield where your conscious identity and your unconscious truth collide. This is why people hide their sexual desires. Judgment strengthens the shadow. Anything shamed is pushed underground. Anything pushed underground gains power. And anything powerful demands expression. That expression often appears as obsession, fantasy, craving, or fixation. The more you suppress desire, the louder it speaks. The more you deny it, the more it controls you. Sex is not physical. Sex is emotional. Sex is symbolic. Sex is psychological. And when you treat it as only physical, you remain confused by your own reactions. You don't understand why certain people destabilize you while others leave you numb. You don't understand why desire intensifies when your emotional life feels empty. You don't understand why attraction feels uncontrollable during periods of identity loss. Because sex is not a response to the present. It is a repetition of the past. The people you desire are not random. They are mirrors. They carry your unexpressed self without realizing it. When they touch you, they touch parts of you avoid touching alone. When they see you, they see versions of you hide from yourself. Things only become confusing when you believe attraction begins in the body. The moment you understand it as a psychological experience, clarity begins to appear. The intensity, the guilt, the shame, the repeating patterns, all of it starts to make sense. This energy isn't about pleasure. Pleasure is only the surface. What's really happening is communication. The unconscious is trying to bring back parts of you that were lost to fear, conditioning, or survival. That's why the people who awaken this feeling most strongly are rarely the ones meant to stay in your life. They aren't here to comfort you. They're here to reveal you. They show you needs you never met. They bring old wounds to the surface. They shine light on parts of yourself you've kept in the dark. And this pull toward them isn't a decision. It's recognition. You can be with someone kind, stable, and loving, and feel little sexual intensity. Not because something is wrong with you, but because safety does not awaken buried parts of the self. The shadow is not drawn to comfort. It is drawn to truth. This is why people remain attached to those who hurt them. The attachment is not to pain. It is to familiarity. The nervous system confuses familiarity with love. And sexual attraction becomes the reenactment of unresolved emotional patterns. You are not craving the person. You are craving the version of yourself that once existed in that emotional environment. Sex becomes an unconscious attempt to heal through intensity. But intensity is not healing. It is a symptom. And the stronger the attraction, the louder the message. This is why intense sexual chemistry often collapses quickly. It was never meant to last. It was meant to reveal. Intense attraction is not destiny. It is unfinished business. Once you understand what someone represents psychologically, the spell weakens. The craving loses power, not because attraction disappears, but because understanding dissolves illusion. Sex becomes destructive only when you refuse to interpret it. When you chase bodies instead of meaning. When you confuse recognition with love. When you treat lust as fate instead of feedback. Every sexual desire has a psychological root. Dominance, surrender, validation, closeness, none of it is random. Your shadow remembers everything your conscious mind learned to ignore or forget. Sexual fantasies are not accidents. They are symbolic expressions of unmet emotional needs. They create the safe inner space where hidden parts of the self are allowed to exist without fear or judgment. But shame blocks understanding. When you shame your sexual desires, you lose access to what they are trying to communicate, and what you don't understand slowly begins to control you. Sexual energy can be deeply transformative when you learn to interpret it. But when it's ignored or misunderstood, it can become destructive. Once the message is understood, the intensity naturally fades, because understanding is the antidote. Sex does not expose your body. It exposes your truth. Your attraction is not an accident. Your desire is not random. And the person who awakened something inside you was never the destination. They were the mirror. It was your shadow speaking, bringing something hidden to the surface. And until you learn to listen to it, you'll keep mistaking intensity for destiny.